Good evening and welcome to the Jinn&Tonic show on Friday, the 9th of November 2018. It's storming outside here in the UK, outside of London. Hopefully you have better weather and having a better time wherever you are. So welcome to all our viewers, to everybody in the chat, and to my co-host, Stop Spamming, and our regular panelist, TJ. Good evening, good gentlemen.
Hey.
Hello, everyone. How you doing?
Yeah, good. Wet outside, so I'm glad I'm indoors this evening. So yes, and to everybody out there, good evening, good afternoon, or good morning, wherever you are. So the topic for this evening, a little bit later on, is Islamic Tawhid, the oneness of God. And obviously this is sparked to some degree from the debate with Muhammad Hijab and David Wood, which we'll chat about a bit later. And I'm sure we'll have a few things to say there, and I'm sure we'll have some comments from people as well. We hope to have Kalam joining us a little bit later on. I have sent him the link, so hopefully, if you are a Muslim or even a non-Muslim, send me a message. Myself or Stops or TJ will keep an eye on the chats, so if you want to join us, then let me know. You would need to friend me on Facebook. We don't give the link out in the chat. Unfortunately, we do get trolled, as do other people, by the way. So it's not actually just critiques of Islam. I have seen trolls go on to Muslim shows as well. I've seen them go on to Kalam. I've seen them go on to Respect. I saw them go on to some Muslim channel as well. So it's, we can't necessarily say that they're all Muslim trolls, or if they are, they certainly aren't differentiating. They're trolling everybody. So we don't give the link out directly on the chat itself. So first few words, guys, anything you want to add before we do a few comments, and then we can carry on from there.
Yeah, I'm done with you. Oh, what a beautiful morning. Oh, okay, I'm good.
How's things over on your side of the pond, TJ?
I can't really complain. Everything's good. Just been, keeping up with the news and stuff like that, especially with the, Asha Bibi case that's been happening in Pakistan. There's been some, conflicting reports as to if she's left the country or not. I'm still trying to keep tabs on that. And then I was also reading about the Islamic terror attack that happened, I believe, in Melbourne, Australia. I believe it was earlier today.
Yes, yes, indeed. So
yeah, so just been keeping, just trying to keep tabs on the news, and I'm sure we'll get into that.
We'll do the comments first, and then we'll come back to a few of those news articles because they are current and newsworthy, and worth having a brief chat about before we get into the main topic. So definitely. With that said, let me bring up a few comments here. The other thing I want to do, and I'm appealing to our viewers as well, is if you are Thunderous, I will send you a link, or Stops, if you have a connection with Thunderous on Facebook, you can send him the link there. Otherwise, I'll do it in a moment. But I also want to encourage you, if you're a viewer and you have some interesting comments, or you have comments where, and we'll share some tonight as well, not just crazy comments, they're always still welcome, but actually I want to broaden it to, Muslims who have become ex-Muslims, and I've got a few of those tonight, and I think if we could share more of those to show people that there are a lot more people, deconverting from Islam than most of us are aware of. And some of our, some of the people that we, myself and Stops, know, ex-Muslims that are quite vocal, that are sharing a lot on Facebook and various other platforms, are doing seemingly great work, and they're getting a lot of, comments and messages from people who have left or have considered leaving or whatever the case is. So we'll share a few of those as well. But let me start here with a few, courtesy of Stop Spamming. And I think, Stops, if you can inform us, this is quite lightly on the comments from the debate, I guess, is it?
Yeah, because what is quite funny is that you have the, well, what do you want to call it? The proponents, the fanboys of either side going, how much the other side got roasted, and everybody's saying they won and the other guy lost horribly. So this is Muslims who claim that wood got burnt in fire, and I thought this was quite nice. And his fanboys are teaching us Islam in comment section because Christians are going now. But as you would imagine, a lot of their comments are getting censored. But I thought it was quite cute. And then now, for me, I put out a reaction video. I think it's like 4 or 5 minutes. And for me, the most embarrassing moment in this entire debate between Dr. David Wood and Muhammad Hijab was when he says, I'm done with this guy and let me do a little bit of singing. And he starts singing in a debate. Okay, this for me is the most, I mean, that's the most stupid, most ridiculous thing I've ever seen in a debate. Okay, so I thought, yeah, how can people think this is cool? I don't get it. And look at this. There's 83 people who think this is wonderful. And then, of course, to be honest, Muhammad Hijab really destroyed it.
Yeah, I mean, we'll talk more about it, and we'll talk more about it after the comments. Say, you know, you've got the fanboys on either side. Here's another one that you sent me very kindly. You will never put Islam down. Allah has promised to make Islam rise amongst all religions. Quran 61, Surah 61, verses 8 and 9. They want to extinguish the light of Allah with their mouths, but Allah will perfect his light, although the disbelievers dislike it. It is he who sent his messenger with guidance and the religion of truth to manifest over all religion, although those who associate with others those who associate others with Allah dislike it. So
there's this false supremacy.
Yeah. Cool. The utter destruction of Christianity.
Just because one guy, I mean, if this were true, then because I sort of destroyed Kenny Boma, that means that all of Islam is now destroyed.
Yes, yeah, of course it's a generalization fallacy. Firstly, you've got to show that anything was actually quote unquote destroyed. But secondly, even if, you know, David Wood didn't perform as well as he could or would, or whatever the case is, there's clearly many other apologists out there that are, you know, better than he is, etc., etc. So, you know, all you could say, if you were to be accurate, you could say, okay, he didn't answer as well as he could have, whatever. But we'll come on to that. So, yeah.
Let me just answer a question in the chat. I made a reaction video, a very short one, and this is the one thing that I pointed out, that David Wood was, you know, he put out a reasonable explanation of the Trinity, because he said, okay, this is the text, this is where it goes from the Old Testament to the New Testament, and he gave a sort of an explanation for the Trinity, how it worked. He got plus points in my eyes for that. But the rest, the show, the entertainment, the crowd control, the everything, clearly, hands down, went to Hijab. I mean, he was performing. He was just, that is all that he was doing. He was just performing for the crowd. And this is the point that where I think that don't people look beyond this, just because he was arrogant, because, you know, because of this theatrical behavior that he had. Most Muslims are only referring to his behavior, his confidence, his everything, the way that he was mocking David Wood, and they did not look at the contents. I mean, Christians have taken his claims and have totally refuted him. They've shown that whatever he said, where he said, okay, this guy didn't mention the Trinity, this guy didn't mention the Trinity, and they showed, yes, actually he did. And they show that the Trinity itself was not something that came, because, I mean, we all know that the Council of Nicaea in, what was it, 325, I think, this is where the Trinity was discussed and agreed upon. But this is not the first time that it was mentioned. A lot of the church fathers mentioned it beforehand, and it was only at the Council of Nicaea that it was actually codified, as it were. But we can't say that before the 4th or 3rd century there was no Trinity. It was around. So, you know, but Hijab doesn't know what he's talking about. It's you know, he follows. He takes things that other people have said, and then he brings it up as though this is a fact, which it is not. And we see this here again, that this was only showmanship, and that's it. There was nothing real.
Okay, I guess we won't be able to do it afterwards. You can't contain yourself until after the comments. So, all right, shall we finish having a discussion on that now before we finish the comments? Because I think there's going to be a lot of that in there. Maybe we should have done that before the comments anyway.
No. Finish the comments because there's a lot more. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Again, if you're watching and you want to join us, let us know there. Type the Jinn&Tonic show so we can see it highlighted in the chat. If you want to join us, you do need to friend me on Facebook, or I can send it to you on Twitter if you're not a Facebook friend. So there are a couple of other options if you want to join us. So a couple more here. Yes, your good friend Kenny Bomer. Why would anyone want to shake the hand of someone like David Wood, who goes out of his way to mock Islam? He's a hate monger and absolute Islamophobe. Well, of course not. You're not going to be intellectually honest and have manners for a debate, are you? I mean, perish the thought. I mean, it was, of course, Hijab who sought this debate. It wasn't David Wood who sought him out. So if you're going to do that, at least have some level of politeness. And for those who haven't seen, there's a little bit of a back, we'll talk about it later. Remind me, there's the backstage footage as well of them having a little bit of conversation. So there we go. So again, Kenny, you shake the hand of somebody because you're always the one going on about an intellectual debate. Is that the way you want to treat somebody in intellectual debate? Then they can just as well walk away. So maybe rethinking your comment there. I brought this up actually. This guy is called Busker in the Park. I think he's sort of more sort of a Tommy Robinson sort of supporter and so forth. But he posted a video about the Patriots standing guard over Lee Rigby's memorial. Now, I didn't get to see what the video was or whatever the case is, but the next minute, this video is no longer available because the YouTube account associated with this video has been closed.
Wow.
So what we see now is that when you post a video of Patriots standing guard over a Lee Rigby memorial, you suddenly have the video made unavailable and closed. Now, it could have been for some other reason, but I didn't leave it that long, maybe a few hours, and then I wanted to come back and watch it, and of course it was unavailable. So the authoritarian, the Orwellian nature of YouTube and other social media, it's not going to get any better, by the way, at this stage, from what I can tell. It's just getting worse and worse with everybody's hurt feelings and everything else. But as we've seen and we've talked about many times, we can turn the tables and we can use the same things against them. And of course, then we can just demolish, this sort of authoritarianness, unless you're going to be completely inconsistent, which of course they are. So...
Oh, Lily, I love you. Hijab didn't shake hands because Muslim women aren't allowed to touch men.
Ooh. Maybe it was the feminine side.
But come on, I mean, wherever he goes, where is Ali now? What? Right next to him. What the fuck is he doing in New York?
Part of his entourage, maybe. Because, of course, he's an important guy, so he needs... And, of course, David Wood's standing by himself, but Hijab's got two buddies with him there.
And they were on a slim budget, so they were sharing.
Yes, I know. 20,000 and £50 for a video and that sort of stuff. Hey, donate £50 for a video. I know it's tough going. They probably had to fly economy class and not business or first, which would have been tremendously painful, I'm sure. Right, moving on. That was the end of those ones. So let me just bring up a couple more here. Did I get them all? I only got the one here. I thought I'd got more from you, but here it is. Let me just share this one with you. So here's Harris Sultan. For those who don't know, he's
brilliant.
Out in Australia. Again, Harris, if you're watching, you're welcome to join us. Here's a message somebody sent to him. Hey, bro, I'm so happy for being an atheist. It wasn't easy for me to leave Islam, but after watching some of your videos and Aman Nawabi's, I was then convinced that Islam isn't what people think it is. I'm so happy to meet you, brother. There was another one that I sent you as well. Let me see if I can quickly save this one here and just bring this one up as well. Yep. Just do it very quickly. The second one as well, also from, Harris, Abdullah Samir, some of the other ex-Muslim fellows that we know are doing some great work, Abdullah Gondol, etc.
Yeah, this is really great. And it's so valuable. And I don't know, we can't stress this enough, that ex-Muslims are really, really the ones who are the most convincing and who have
yeah. I mean, they've been there, done it. Here it is again, a similar one. Hey, bro, thanks for accepting my friend request. I'm seeing your videos and posts from past few months, and I appreciate your work and research. I've always wanted to write you, but couldn't have the courage before. But now I'm done with my research, study, and comparison among religions. Now I can proudly say that I'm an ex-Muslim, and I don't believe in all these men created religions, which is only to imprison the human mind. So there's always a little bit of good news in there somewhere. So good on that fella. Let me just bring in our friends here. I didn't see them there. Good evening, Thunderous, and
Hi.
good evening, Abu. How are you guys?
Fine, thank you.
I'm well, thank you too.
That certainly always brings a moment of, I don't know, I could almost say emotional, but not quite. Certainly a pleasing moment when you can see some of the Muslims who have engaged critical thinking, who have looked into these things, and then, come to the conclusion that I think all of us in the panel already have, which is that, it's not true and it's man-made. So I think if more of those, if you guys see them around, throw me a few my direction. I'd like to read more of those out so people can see, the work that many people are doing.
And Scarlett, if you have the new channel for Busker in the Park, just how do you just write it without the @ without the whatever, without the www, and we'll just spread it, because I think he did he made some excellent videos. He made some excellent points.
Yes, I mean, you don't have to agree with somebody, but he still went out there. He covered the Tommy Robinson court case and all that sort of stuff. I think he was out there doing a lot of different things. So, agree or not, he was certainly doing a bit there. So, if we ever get a chance, maybe we can find out what happened to his channel. Well, having said that, let's talk then about, we've got Thunderous in and we've got Abu in. I don't know if you guys saw the debate with Hijab and David Wood. So let's deal with that, and then we can move on to the main topic.
Oh, I absolutely did see it. I actually watched it about, I finished watching it about half an hour ago.
Okay, so what's your thoughts? Give us a few of your, I actually only watched a bit of it, so I'll be interested in your guys' thoughts.
I've seen David Wood debate before, but I've never seen David Wood debate like that. I thought it was particularly calm, maybe a little bit subdued, but that could have been something to do with the percentage of Muslims in the audience. That's not David Wood's normal debate style. I've never seen this, but the other guy was a joke. I've not seen anybody talk like that in a live debate. So it was disgraceful, in my opinion. I don't think it did Islam with its arguments any credibility, and certainly his demeanour and posture and attitude. Absolutely no. I was appalled by his performance.
Well, I'll second that. I watched that little bit. I just happened to be, online at that stage, doing some other work, and I managed to catch that little bit as well, where he was sort of shouting and then started singing, verses and so forth. He's done that sort of stuff occasionally at the park, but he certainly ramped it up here. And whatever true statements, if he did make some, kind of, for me anyway, got lost in, trying to be a bit of a clown and a smart aleck. And of course, he's appealing to people who love the drama. Yeah. So these are not intellectual people who care about the facts, who are going to go away and digest what was said on both sides. It's who sounded better, who sounded like he put the other man in his place. And of course, that's what he came there to do. If you saw his pre-videos, it was all about, this Islamophobe, we're going to teach him a lesson. And so that's what he came. And of course, for those who haven't seen it, there was this little behind the scenes video before they went on stage, where the moderator was just giving them the rules and so forth, and you can see Hijab standing tall there with his hands there, like ready if he were going to go to a boxing match, except dressed in a suit. And then he's got his seconds, who was Ali Dawa and some other fella next to him.
But didn't you think he looked so out of place in that suit?
Yeah, it was. It's like somebody
so
wearing something that you're uncomfortable in. It's like you're wearing something that doesn't belong to you almost. That definitely doesn't suit him.
I thought the moderator was absolutely appalling, because they made a at the beginning to we'll have no insults and abusive terms or anything like that. And that's all Mohammed did. I thought it was rude. I thought it was abusive. I thought it was belligerent. And I couldn't quite understand why the moderator didn't turn around. But you can, because the moderator was a Muslim, so he's not going to tell anything to his
Oh, was he? Okay, I didn't know that.
Or he appeared to look like one.
No, it was a Muslim society, yeah.
So,
right.
And the audience, as far as I was concerned, it didn't matter what argument David Wood was going to present. I find in a Muslim versus Christian debate, what tends to happen is The Muslims are there to support their guy. They're not there to listen to the arguments. It's the same standard that you find throughout the world. If it's in Australia, India, Pakistan, or Europe, the Muslim crowd are there to support their guy, and they will jeer, they will support. Because what happens is, if you notice what Muhammad did, he started speaking not intellectually or logically, but emotionally. He was appealing at the emotion, and once that started to go, when he got the emotions going in his audience, in his crew, that's pretty much what took over. And I was just watching an emotional show.
Yeah, it was personal. Yeah,
indeed. Abu, TJ, your thoughts? Did you guys watch it? Have you heard anything about it? What have you guys got to say?
I did watch basically the whole thing. I think I missed the maybe first 2 to 3 minutes of the debate, but I mean, most of it was, white noise to me. So, but I mean, you could tell that, hijab definitely, had it out for David Wood. For him to charge him with Islamophobia was stupid, obviously, because I believe that such a term is a fabricated term. So, I mean, but you could tell that, I think he was riled up, saying, I could see, physically he was very, he was getting, very emotional and angry. But to blame David Wood for, anti-Muslim bigotry and for quote unquote hate crimes against Muslims, I think was very disingenuous. I think that, David Wood, whether I, agree with him or disagree with him, regarding his ideas is one thing, but he has never called for, open attacks against Muslims or any sort of anti-Muslim bigotry. And he said himself that, I criticized the teachings of Muhammad, which is different from, calling for attacks against people. So I think ultimately David, did defend himself, but I mean, he seemed though very, I'm not sure what the word I want to use is, but very, I would say timid, in his delivery, and he seemed kind of reserved. It kind of seemed like he was holding back a little bit. I'm not sure why that is, but my guess is probably, the majority of the crowd, I think, was Muslim. So, and it was hosted by the MSA. So,
yeah, it does strike me. I wonder why he accepted those sort of terms and why he did it in that way. He didn't have anybody with him. He was going into a hostile audience with his opponent's moderator, and his opponent had his seconds and thirds there as well. So it's sort of, I wonder why he did it that way. And if you look at that little bit of back scene, backstage footage there, he put out his hand to shake it and then very quickly took it away again, instead of leaving it out there for hijab to refuse. So it seemed to me he started off in that manner at the very beginning there. Put the hand out, quickly take it away as if it's been burnt or something like that. That's the way it came across to me anyway. So, Abu, you're very quiet there. Are you still with us, sir? And if so, have you got any thoughts on it?
No, I'm sorry. I haven't watched the debate.
Okay. No worries. Cool. So is there any more thoughts on the debate itself? I mean, I didn't watch the whole of it, so I don't know. It could well have been that hijab did a better job. I mean, I've heard Hassan Radwan suggest that he did a better job. I even heard, amazingly enough, Jason Burns, the Christian preacher that comes down to Speaker's Corner, also suggesting that hijab did a better job. So, it seems to be that even among some Christians, they're also suggesting that hijab did a better job in the sense of answering the questions. Whether he answered them honestly and fully, that's a different story. And as you pointed out, Stops, there's already been critiques of hijab's responses. But at least he, apparently, as I say, I didn't see all of it, but apparently he attempted to, or tried to answer some of the questions. And I think, but what Stops and I talked about it before, I think that the way that it was set up was not a great way. Either you're going to defend and critique Tawheed, or you're going to defend and critique the Trinity. But putting two of those topics into one debate, you were never going to get enough information on one. So maybe they should have done two debates, a part one and a part two, rather than trying to put them together. But I do believe that was hijab's request or insistence or whatever, that they do it in that way. He didn't just want to defend Tawheed, he wanted to challenge Trinity.
Yeah, but the funny thing is that the one thing that Islam has is, the one God. And this is the most outstanding feature that they always trumpet. We have the one God. I mean, he's the best of all of the gods, but they don't care about that. They say it's the one and only. And then you take the worst part, the most difficult part to argue in Christianity, which is the stupid Trinity, which is really ridiculous. Not even Christians understand it. And you argue those cases. I don't understand how anybody would go and do that. Why would David Wood go and argue something like this? The one which is, you cannot defend the Trinity. You can't.
Well, stops. Let me, I won't say challenge you, but let me put it a different way. It depends. And again, I'm happy to be wrong. If you can, if you can set me straight, I'm very happy to do that. And I think we've got a Christian in here as well. Set me straight. If you're just talking about the concept of the Trinity, i.e. you have this all-powerful God, he sent down, his Son, which is part of him, and he's got a, Holy Spirit, which is part of him. So you have what appears to be three distinct entities, for want of a better word, but they are all one. It's like cutting up a cake. I don't see what is incoherent or illogical about that. Where I do see it would be challenging is to get the verses from the Bible and marry them all up and make sure that they all work together, because it could have been stated very clearly in the Bible, like we always critique with the Qur'an, and we don't see that. But maybe you can share with me just the concept. Do you think the concept itself is incoherent or illogical, or is it when you try to map the concept onto the Bible where you feel it's weak?
No, it's the other way around. The mapping is easy to understand. The concept, when you have the Trinity, where you have a God who takes the Son, and then there's a Holy Spirit. I mean, this I can argue, and I'm explaining this to Muslims, by the way, because I've developed this analogy where I say an M3 is also a 3 Series and is part of BMW, but the M3 is not BMW, but BMW is the overall, is the Father, the Lord, and blah, blah, blah. And the M3 is part of that. And so is the M Series, the 3 Series. So this you can sort of understand, you can explain it, you can understand it, but it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense that an all-powerful God would go and create humans in order to have them sin, and he learns his lesson and starts from scratch, not by redoing everything, but by flooding everything and killing everything that is totally innocent. And then on the second,
that's a separate topic, though. I mean,
Can I?
Yeah, but then he makes the same mistake, and then to rectify his mistakes, this time he doesn't flood the place, but he sends his Son as a scapegoat to kill the own Son as something that he then declares as punishment, where the guy is dead for 3 days and then goes to heaven. So I wouldn't really call this punishment. But then an all-powerful God sends his Son as a scapegoat, sends him down, kills him, takes him up to heaven, and then says, okay, now you're all saved. Bakat. I mean, that's crazy. That's absolutely ludicrous.
I agree. I agree that it.
Answer that.
Yeah, go ahead, Andres. I'm actually sort of a little bit on your side here, because I think you could take that view, but I think you could be a bit more charitable on it as well.
I think, that he did the flood and then sent his Son. I think if you look at the Genesis account, first of all, after Adam and Eve sinned, the first thing that God says is, I think it's in Genesis 3:16 or 15, where it says, I shall put enmity between you and the woman, your seed and her seed. He'll bruise you in the head and you'll bruise him in the heel. And that's referred to as the Edenic covenant, which means that he was going to send somebody at some future point in time. As far as the flood is concerned, the scriptures are quite clearly there when you read Genesis, that at that particular period of time, mankind, as it were they were just up to badness, no goodness, and that's why the flood came. If you're following the narrative through, but I've read the Bible, and I would have to agree with Mo on this one, and it's very rare I'd have to agree with a Muslim. But for me, the Trinity doesn't work in the Bible, and the reasons why I say that is because when you look at the Bible, if you look at, say, something like John 1:1, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God. Then you got Colossians, who was the firstborn of all creation. You got Proverbs, where he's described as a master worker. So there's several scriptures you can use in the Bible that, if you believe the biblical narrative and that Jesus came from heaven to earth, you'd have to accept that Jesus was actually created by God as the first thing God ever created. He wasn't a co-equal. Jesus praying is one thing. I mean, you can ask the question, can God get scared? Well, the answer would be no. So why was Jesus sweating blood in the Garden of Gethsemane? So there are ways to prove that the Trinity is not in the Bible. The fact that the nation of Israel for 1,500 years never worshipped or accepted the Trinity. And it couldn't be that you can't understand the Trinity, because surrounding religions, particularly like the Egyptians and such, had their trinities. So it wasn't like an intellectual or spiritual concept that they couldn't grasp. Other faiths and religions at the time did. So when you go through the biblical narrative, it's quite clear the Trinity is not there.
Yeah, I mean, we could have a separate show on that. I mean, we focus more on Islam here, but so it's a bit of a diversion. I understand that. I just wanted to see if the concept itself was incoherent. It doesn't appear to be.
Well, the fact that you
just
keep
the concept
people
itself, not referred to in the Bible. I understand and I accept your point. That's very difficult to, or you have to work hard in the Bible to bring it out.
Yeah.
I just don't see it being incoherent in principle. If you have an all-powerful God, this having the Trinity type of thing is not beyond the power of an all-powerful God, unless there's incoherence there that I'm missing.
No, there is no. It is incoherent. Nobody can understand something that doesn't exist if it doesn't exist. Hence why it's incoherent. The Bible is quite a simple book to read. If the Trinity was there, it would say it. It's one of the things I argue with Muslims. If you believe that the Bible's been corrupted, then why isn't the Trinity in the Bible? You're using the Bible to condemn it, but the easiest thing for the conspirators to have done was to put the Trinity in it. Then it would have been made simpler. But the fact that the Trinity is not in the Bible, that's why nobody understands it.
Yeah, okay. We can come back to that and chat about that again. I want to get on to a couple more things, and then we'll go on to Tawheed itself. This will stop telling us how bad the Trinity was. And I can see why you would say that. And like I say, I mean, do you guys agree that in future, something like this, it's best to have a single topic rather than two topics at once?
Absolutely.
Abu wanted to add something.
Sorry, Abu, I forgot. Yes, please go ahead, sir. Sorry.
No, but I agree with Stops about the story that it doesn't make sense.
You agree with me?
I'm sorry. I didn't want to do it, but I'm forced to. And I can agree with Thunderous also that it's lacking. But if you look at the concept itself, like without the story attached to it,
yeah.
I mean, if you look at like for example, Hindu pantheism. There you have this concept of Brahman being the supreme deity and everything is Brahman. But you have an extremely large number of God that actually are Brahman, but they are part of this Brahman, but they are also God. And then what I feel that what Christianity has done is that it has reduced this very large number of gods into just 3 parts, but they are all part of the greater God. Is that incorrect?
Well, I think as Thunderous has said, and I think other Christians would agree that the early church didn't have the concept of Trinity, so it only came in a bit later on.
Yeah, that's good. That's correct. Yeah.
But I think, as you say, there's a separate show. I mean, that's perhaps not one that we could do. I could do it on my channel or something like that, have the Christians come on and have the Muslims come on. But otherwise we'd divert, too far with that. So
yeah, but hang on. Is this the way that I see it? Is that the Hindus came up with this idea of the gods, then the Jews decided to have their version, then the Christians came and married the different ones, and they still wanted to have a little bit of the old feeling of the many gods and combine it with the one God, because they thought that the Jews were going overboard and they needed the Messiah. So they sort of married the concepts and came up with Christianity, and then Muslims came around and misunderstood all 3 and sort of gelled everything together, and this is the result of Islam. That's why they get so many things wrong. If you look at the individual concepts, if you look at Ezra, the son of the Jewish God, if you look at Mary, who is the sister of Moses and the daughter of Imran, and there are so many inconsistencies which I think are based in the fact that they were trying to put all different areas together to appease the different groups within the region.
Yeah. I also this in at least in Catholicism and in Orthodox, they have this the saints have taken the role of the gods. So you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many other religions out there that you can say perhaps they borrowed this and that, because obviously Christianity wasn't the first, isn't it? You've got some of these older religions that have been around for much longer than Christianity.
And then this is exactly right, TJ. Yes, because then they went back again And they said, well, it doesn't make sense. And this is the Unitarians who then say, okay, well, fuck the Trinity, let's do away with it, and we're much better off with only one God. Exactly. And this is then where Islam comes in. This is, yeah.
Yeah, that's my question, is that, you know, a lot of the founding fathers were, you know, of America were actually Unitarians. So I'm curious to see, like, I have to do some more, like, you know, some more research, because I think they're a relatively new development. I don't think they came into like the 15th or 16th century, but obviously they have a radically different view, and yet they still consider themselves as Christians. So it's kind of interesting to see the whole dichotomy between the two groups. So I'm just curious about that, but I will have to do some more research. But you know, they do exist. So.
Yeah.
Well, the Muslims have a problem reconciling the Trinity because they misunderstand it, because there's one sentence in the Quran which actually says it's Mother, Father, and Son, which is the Trinity. So,
all right, let's move on. A couple of the news articles, and then let's get into the Tawheed. So,
let me change my avatar.
One of the things that happened recently, and it was we were reminded by somebody in the chat. There was I don't know if you've all heard the news of somebody crashing their 4x4 in Australia, in Melbourne, into killing somebody. Well, jumping out of the car, from what I understood.
How unique! Something new. Crashing a car into people. Wow.
Setting it on fire, stabbing somebody. There's actually footage I happened to see. Somebody posted on Facebook. Somebody with a mobile phone inside, I guess it's a restaurant or something, and you actually see the person that's been stabbed lying there in a pool of blood, and then this attacker actually having a knife in his hand.
Yeah, Rob, I posted a link in the I posted a link in the chat, and in the link there's that video if you want to screen share it. I think it's a relatively short video.
Yeah,
I don't think we should show that video.
No, we won't show it.
But did he use the car first, or?
Yeah. So he ran into people and then jumped out, set it on fire, and then it stabbed a shopper to death, and started swiping at the police who arrived.
Set it on fire? Why did he?
Well, presumably, so hopefully it would explode, maybe kill more people. It did. In the video, you can actually see the car explode. Not as in like a big fireball. It was already on fire, but just presumably the fuel tank got, and you can hear the explosion there. So not a massive explosion, but enough that you can hear the difference. And you can actually see this person trying to attack the police. So it's rare that you get the live footage, but you have somebody, because it was in a big, busy street, somebody's with a mobile phone. You can see a massive crowd. It almost looks like, it's been staged as a movie, and you can see massive crowds, everybody just standing there. And I'm like, why don't people, all the man has got is a knife. It's not like he's got an automatic weapon or he's got any, bombs on him, or presumably not. You couldn't see anything on him. And everybody just stands there watching. There's one shopper who's got a shopping trolley, who's trying to push the shopping trolley into him, and then two policemen. So if you haven't watched it, then again, go and watch it.
If they're two policemen, then they have guns. So.
Well, they don't.
But otherwise,
they don't.
They don't have guns.
Well, these two guys didn't. They had a taser, but that didn't seem to be effective. And then you actually do see him getting shot as well. So at a later stage, towards the end of the video, you do see him getting taken down.
But I don't know if I should. But if someone has a knife, if you have men. Grab a long object, because the disadvantage of having a knife is it's very short. So if you have several people with like iron, like baseball bats, or maybe even a long spade can be useful.
Yeah, I'm not sure they're going to carry that around with you.
No, but you can always look around you and see if you can find a long stick or something.
Yeah, that's probably true as well. Yeah.
Just
so that was the one. Case. That was the one news article that went live in the last, I think, 24, 48 hours, whatever it was, quite recently. And then, of course, we've got this Christian lady, Bibi. I think, is it a surname, first name, who's now been released from prison, been in prison for 8 years for blasphemy, apparently. And if you go and read the story about it, she was accused by some Muslim woman. And she's been sitting in prison, and now she's been released. Hasn't left, apparently. Conflicting reports, I think TJ was talking about as well. So there's been conflicting reports, but apparently I think she's still in Pakistan. But there were riots and all that sort of stuff by a few far extreme type organizations that, she should have been put to death. So she's presumably hiding out somewhere, and hopefully somebody will give her and her family, those are the sort of people that you want to welcome in here. If you're going to have somebody's life is in danger, how many Western countries, I think the Netherlands was opening it up or open to it. Every Western country should invite somebody like that in. Their life is in danger, being threatened by hundreds, thousands of people for a ridiculous claim. But it seems most of our countries here are very quiet on that matter.
Yeah, just to build off that point, I saw these group of clerics were staging a protest, and one of the clerics, he basically declared the army chief of the Pakistani army as a non-Muslim, and I think he called for his head. And then he also said that anybody who works for for those lawyers who help get her off the case, like if you're a driver, if you're a chef or whatever, basically you could kill them. So you have incitement to murder too, by those clerics. So it's.
Sometimes they think they're brave, but they could be foolish. If you're going to, make those sort of statements to the Pakistani army, these guys are not necessarily saints. That guy could just disappear tomorrow. That particular dude just disappeared. Something happened. Who knows? I think in that country, even if you're an extremist, the army and so forth, or unless they're all extremists, in which case you're safe. But I don't know if they all are. So anyway, any thoughts on those incidents, guys? What are your thoughts on the Christian lady or the Melbourne attack? Or are we all quiet?
I don't think there's any point. I think we all agree there's nothing to say about this. I think it's appalling to have a woman being accused of something that she never even did, and then to have clerics come out and scream bloody murder and tell the people that not only she should be killed, but anybody who gives her a break or says that she shouldn't be killed, that they should be killed as well. That's crazy. That's really, really crazy. So I don't think you can comment on this any further. It's crazy. That's it.
I think I'll just say one last thing about the Melbourne attack. I think it's time that the Western countries start to reevaluate, immigration policies. I think it's time that, I think that, this whole call for, open borders and all that crap, it needs to stop. And I think, countries need to start to reassess, the whole, immigration system. I think it's time. I think that.
TJ, come on. Of course not. This is the clever propaganda, because there are so many Muslim groups who have managed, over the last 5 or 6 years, have managed to get people to think that Islam equals Muslim, and therefore if you are in any way criticizing Islam, you are automatically attacking Muslims. This is the clever propaganda that they have done. How are you going to do that? You can't. You first need to get rid of all these preconceived misconceptions that they have to get into the facts of the matter, that if you are criticizing the bad ideas of Islam, you are not automatically criticizing all Muslims. Now, how are you going to do that?
Well, that's why I think that there should be a temporary, halt on immigration. Well, I'll speak for America, at least. I think we need to have a, temporary halt on immigration, assess our status, see which groups, come in and, which can assimilate, which can contribute economically, looking at culture, obviously, looking at, English proficiency, things like that. And those, who take advantage, who commit crimes. And obviously, there's multiple factors that need to be looked at. But I think that there needs to be some sort of, reform, because unless you believe in open borders and you don't believe in the concept of the nation state, we can have that debate then. But ultimately, I think that, there needs to be something done. And I think that, this would be a good place to start ultimately, because I think culture matters and I think ideas matter. So I think that ultimately, countries need to sit down and have this discussion, or else I just think the problem is going to get worse.
But reality is different. You know that Germany is sending ships to the coast of Africa to pick up the people to bring them into Germany? That's crazy, because the reasoning is these are poor people and we need cheap labor. And this is what they're trying to import. They're making the same mistake as they did 50 years ago in bringing Turkish sort of workers in, thinking that they will come here, do some work, and then bugger off again. They don't realize that they are not going to bugger off again, and then they're stuck with it. And this is now the problem. Do they want to really water it down? Do they want to bring more Islam into the country or not? I don't think they are thinking like this.
Well, no, of course not, because it's because I guess the left declares the discourse. So if you say anything critical, then you're a racist, you're a bigot, you're a xenophobe. So ultimately, it's just quite comical, because this whole debate has become so emotional, where any sort of logic or any sort of facts don't matter. It's people's feelings that matter, which I think is bullshit.
It's a fact. I mean, I'm not allowed to go to Mecca. Does anybody complain about that? No, we just take it as a fact. We just take it for granted that this is the way that it is. We're not allowed to go into Mecca. They have the immigration control. You're not allowed to do that. I mean, can you live anywhere in the Middle East? No. You need to have a very good reason before you're allowed to go into any country, whether it be Emirates or Qatar or Saudi, anywhere. I mean, if you don't have a job, if you don't have a company vouching for you, forget it. You're not allowed in.
Yeah.
Well, that's not the case in Europe right now. At least I think that at least with Western Europe, I think Eastern Europe is different. So I guess we have to take it on a country by country basis. But I think overall, I think that this discussion needs to be had though on immigration and the consequences of it. I think that there needs to be a discussion about this.
Yeah, I think there's a double standard there, because as to hear what you're saying in the chat, and other people have said, Muslims and other people that are suggesting open borders are okay in Western countries, are they okay with doing the same thing in Muslim countries? Can we have not that we would probably, because their countries and societies are at a much lower level than most Western societies, but are they okay with atheists or Christians just coming in there en masse, going to Mecca or going anywhere else? Are they okay with that? And if they're not, then there's a double standard, which is often the case. So, I understand the short-sighted view where people go, oh, yeah, open borders, wonderful idea. Well, if you think about it for longer than a few moments, you see that it's not necessarily a good idea. It's only a good idea if you are coming from a lowly place or a underdeveloped society. Then it's a wonderful idea. Not so wonderful the other way around.
But it's not only that it is a double standard, it's also like things like this has long-term consequences. If you the idea of open borders may sound very good, and I think people who are for it are probably are for it for good reasons. But you also have to think, okay, if you have a former Christian country here, and then 20 years from that, like 1/5 of the population will be Muslims, whatever that means. Not that all of them will be practicing Muslims. That probably will have consequences. So you have to, maybe you should at least think about it. What could the consequences be?
Yeah. All right. Let's move on. I'm sure we've got plenty to talk about on the Tawheed. I'm just going to start it off very briefly here with a quick reading, and then I'll let stops and you guys jump in. So here is, for those who don't know, just bring it up here. Here is what Tawheed actually is. I'm sure most people know, but for those that don't, Tawheed, Arabic Tawheed, means oneness, and in brackets, God. As Stops was pointing out, and I'm sure he'll go into this in a bit more detail, it doesn't actually say the oneness of God. It says oneness. It's also romanticized as Tawheed, Tawheed, and Tawheed is the indivisible oneness concept of monotheism in Islam. Tawheed is the religion's central and single most important concept upon which a Muslim's entire faith rests. It unequivocally holds that God is one and single, therefore the Islamic belief in God is considered Unitarian. Tawheed constitutes the foremost article of the Muslim profession of faith. The first part of the Shahada, the Islamic declaration of faith, is the declaration of belief in the oneness of God. To attribute divinity to anything or anyone else is shirk, an unpardonable sin according to the Qur'an, if repentance is not sought afterwards. Well, that's interesting. We'll talk about that as well. Muslims believe that the entirety of the Islamic teaching rests on the principle of Tawheed. So there it is. I'll post a link for those that want to go and read a little bit more into that. Oops, let's stay there. no point in doing that. And all right, Stops, do you want to take it from here? I've just got to quickly do something. So if you want to take over, other guys obviously feel free to jump in as well.
Well, there's not much that you can add to this. I think this is a very good summary, and it, of course, avoids all the contradictions that you have in the Quran around this, because the Quran says in several instances that this God is the best of something, of all the gods, which shows that originally there were several gods. And then the funny thing is, if there is only one God, why do you have why does the Quran mention 5 gods? This is quite strange how this whole thing fits together. But the idea is quite simple, that you have one God, you don't have a Son, you don't have a Holy Ghost. You have all these things in the Quran, but they are not considered to be God. So you have one God, which apparently is supposed to make it a lot easier. I don't understand it. I think a committee, I think a team is much better. And if you look at the mess that the universe is, I think if this was one God, he should be ashamed at the the level of workmanship delivered here. I mean, that's pretty bad. Plus, this God says that every human being is created in order to worship this creator, but only 20% do, or maybe 15% do. That means you've got a failure rate of 85% of this one God, which is not a high degree of confidence, I must admit. So I think this is a bit funny. I don't know why Muslims are so proud of this, but it is one of the central tenets, even though it doesn't make sense because they say it's the only creator. But then if you go into the text, you find that Jesus can also create, but then Jesus is only allowed to create when this God allows it. So the Quran is a huge mess on this.
But by implication, aren't all religions, with the exception of the Trinitarians, aren't they all Tawheed as well?
Yes. Yeah, it's not unique. Absolutely not.
Exactly.
But Muslims make it look as though it is. Yeah, you're right.
There was an interesting video some time back that I saw as well with the history. I can't remember. I'd love to find it. It was very well voiced. It had this lovely animation that showed the historical what's the word, evolution of gods. There were many gods and slowly became the one God, and the original, if you can put it that way, the original one God, I don't even know if I could say the original one God, but seemingly the original one God, certainly from an Abrahamic point of view, appeared to be Yahweh, this God of, I don't even know if they used the word Yahweh, I can't remember, but this God of, war, a battling war, and then that evolved as well. So it sort of shows the evolution of the God. Abu, TJ, have you got anything you'd like to add?
Okay, one thing I'd like to point out, that in the debate with Wood and Hijab, the funny thing is that Wood made a case for the Trinity, but Hijab never made a case for the oneness of God. He mentioned it and he says it's a much better thing, but he never explained it. He never expounded on it. He never went and said, okay, this is the development, exactly what Rob is just saying, that there is an evolution which led to the result in Islam today. This never happened. So I think this was incredibly weak.
Yeah, well, as I say, I didn't see it all, but I've heard that same thing stops from many other people as well, where he didn't seem to want to defend. And I think, again, that's why that sort of debate was not as fruitful as it could have been. He went there to try and, quote unquote, destroy Wood.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
The Muslims don't like David Wood, whether you agree with his approach or not. Obviously, one really should be taking issue with what he says. Is what he's saying true or not true? Rather than, and obviously he's been quite disparaging, and he's got that sort of disparaging tone about him. But again, that's just the way he is. And I think if you can look past that and go, okay, what is he saying? Is it true or not true? But that's been Hijab and other Muslims' approach as well, isn't it? This whole thing of trying to make somebody look foolish, regardless of whether what they say is in fact true.
But just on that, just on the David Wood style, I've seen several of his videos. I think it's very easy to a Muslim to attack the personality rather than attack the material, and that's exactly what's going on, because the Muslims don't want Muslims listen to David Wood, because the material he covers is irrefutable. He doesn't just stand there or sit there and quote it. He actually pulls out the Quran and Hadith and shows you where the location of the material is and says, there you go, read it for yourself. And the Muslims don't like that. As far as his attitude is concerned, I find it hard to believe that Muslims will criticize him in such a way, considering their own text says that non-Muslims are the worst of creatures, unless they're God saying that. So, you know, David Wood can say what he likes, how he likes, when he likes, with whatever context that he likes, but it's never going to be as insulting as when Allah turns around and says non-Muslims are the worst of creatures. You just get a great statement from a God.
One thing I want to point out here, this was beautiful what you just said, because now turn this around. Imagine if David Wood had displayed the kind of behavior that Hijab did.
The things I think David Wood was deliberately reticent. I don't think for a minute that he did not have the ability to absolutely destroy him and Islam. I've seen him enough times to know this is a guy that you don't want to mess with, and considering his background history as well, you know, his dad wouldn't want to mess with him either. So I think he displayed, for some curious reason that we're not privy to, a reluctance and a reticence to respond in kind.
Yeah, well, maybe he'll come out and talk about it at some stage and share what went on. I mean, I've seen him attempt to challenge atheists, and I think, you know, like the same with some other theists, very poor there. You know, I kind of like expect more, because, you know, you see them challenging Islam and bringing the text and stuff, and now obviously we don't have text, so it's harder. But I've been very disappointed with, you know, I'm expecting it to be something, and it's the old Kalam argument, or some of these arguments that are just, you know, in my view, so weak now that I'm surprised. I think it's better sticking to, you know, if you're Christian, challenge Islam. Challenging atheism, I think, is much harder to do. Anyway, Tawheed itself. Let me ask you guys in the panel, and Stops in particular, from listening to the debate with Wood, do you think that he brought up any points that challenged Tawheed, in your view, in any substantial way?
No.
Okay, so do you feel that everybody watching, if you are a Muslim, do you feel that everybody watching would have walked away going, you know, Tawheed is as solid as, you know, as I've always been led to believe, you know, there's no problem there whatsoever?
No, because we don't know we were never told what Tawheed actually is. This is the problem. If somebody had come up and said, okay, Tawheed is the claim, blah, 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 and this is the reality, and this is where it looks like, just what we did now in the first 5 minutes when we defined this, then, you know, then people would have had some information, but we never got this. This was just mentioned, and everybody said, well, Tawheed, this is there, and it makes a lot of sense. Why does it make sense? To me, it doesn't. And it was just, you know, it was a given. I don't understand why, but that's the way that I got the impression that people didn't even want to talk about it. They just said, well, it's there, why talk about it?
Yeah, which is kind of strange, isn't it? But I wonder, here's something that's always been of interest to me, and I want to just share this again from the Wikipedia page, and perhaps you guys can comment on this, because I'm interested in this, and there may well be a logical argument. So this is really a question from me to you or to anybody else. So God as the cause of causes, and one of the things they talk about here is this one here. The Quran argues that the knowledge of God as the creator of everything rules out the possibility of lesser gods, since these beings must be themselves created. Okay, I understand that from that point of view, but let me ask you guys in the panel, or you as a viewer, if you're watching this, is it impossible or incoherent or illogical to suggest that there could be like a council of gods. What is it about the oneness of God that rules this out or makes it impossible? Or is it just more likely that there's a single creator? The only thing I've ever heard is some people will say, oh, well, if there was a council of gods, or if there was more than one and they were all sort of equally powerful, or they were powerful in their own right. One was a creator, one was seeing into the future, omnipotent, omniscient. One was, omnipresent, for example, whatever the case is. What rules that out? Because if they were godly, there's no reason to believe that they couldn't interact in a godly way and not have disagreements. So can you guys share with me your thoughts on why it is that it's either, is it incoherent or illogical, or is it just somehow more likely that it's only one God?
For me personally, I would say that there is only one God. I wouldn't, if I follow the biblical narrative, I find that there's only one God. However, the Bible does describe other gods. I think the Apostle Paul describes the belly being a god, or wine can be a god. I think it's 1 John 5:19, the God of this system of things, pointing to Satan. I think when you look at the biblical narrative and you look at the context of what the word God means in lowercase g, it's with reference to the position that you put something in line of God. For instance, if you're not worshiping God, but if something else in your life is more important than God, then in effect that has become your God. That's the way I would understand the way that the Bible is trying to tell us. For instance, to some people, Manchester United is their God because that's what they work for, that's what they live for, and that consumes their passion and their life and their direction. So in that context, lowercase g, that is a God. But as far as the Bible is concerned, from the way I read it, and I've not seen anything to contradict it, would be there's only one God, and everything else is the position of what you put in place instead of God.
Yeah, I can understand that. That's if you're going to define God as the most powerful being, or as something like that, that you could always call that God. But do you think, Thunderous, that there's anything incoherent or illogical about supposing that it could be like the comic books where you have 5 or 6 gods sitting around, or in this case floating around, and each of them has a specific task for which they have an omni property, but they're able to interact in some way that doesn't require them to disagree. They come together, make decisions, and a universe is created, or whatever, what we see today. What is it about the one God? Is it impossible for that to be the case, I guess, is what I'm asking.
I think there have been religions that have the thoughts that what you're talking about, like you can have a God of the air and maybe God of the land and God of the sea and God of whatever, and somehow the unity in the way that they cooperate means that you can have 4 seasons, and there'll be rain from the God of water, and there'll be land from the arable land, as it were, and then you've got the God of the wind, so that it casts the pollen, so that's blah blah blah. Now I'm trying to freestyle here, but I know that there are religions where you can have 4 or 5 that have a central cohesive role, if you like, for the earth to function. But the fact that those religions are not around now, I think, speaks a lot. I think they've been there in the past, but they're not in existence today.
Yeah, I think they've obviously been superseded. I just wanted to find out if there was something about more than one God that made it either unreasonable or impossible. If that's not the case, then yes, of course, one can posit a single, quote-unquote, all-powerful God, but it doesn't rule out the possibility of other gods. Just because the books say so doesn't make it the case.
I think when you look at religions and people as well, somehow, within the human psyche for many people, the fact that there's only one God seems to make sense. It seems to fit something within their own consciousness, if you like, or their own makeup or their own psyche, that the fact that there's only one ultimate God makes sense. There's something that resonates there.
Maybe it doesn't make sense, but it's much easier to focus on one.
Yes, I think I would agree with that. It's easier for people to grasp if there's just one. If there's more than one, what does that mean, and how do they interact? And some difficult questions come up. That doesn't mean it's not possible, but one God does simplify things, I suppose, in that way. And so, from that point of view, it's potentially easier for people to understand and grasp, etc. Especially if this God can do all the things that a council of gods could do. Well, just make it one God. Why not? It's simpler, isn't it? But that doesn't necessarily mean it's true.
And that's where I think polytheism, at least historically, has had some sort of advantage over monotheism in a sense where at least with polytheism there was some sort of a plurality. So people could choose their individual god and be fine with that, and they wouldn't go to war war with each other over that fact. So I think in terms of the utility of polytheism, I think it had an advantage, because with monotheism, we've seen the infighting over the centuries, because one group had it wrong, or one group was deemed as heretical or whatever. But I never really saw that in like the polytheistic world, especially. I think that would be one advantage of polytheism over monotheism.
Okay, yeah, that's quite possible. Is there anything in the chat? Feel free to add anything in, guys. Abba, you've been very quiet there. I know you're listening quietly. Obviously, your time being a Muslim, what's your view on the Tawheed, other than it being true and simple and so forth? Is there anything else that you want to add, having believed in that for so long?
Well, I think that Tawheed is kind of simple. I mean, I think that's probably one of the things that are like the most appealing. might sound weird, but there's something beautiful about simplicity. Although my worldview today is more simple, because I have removed even the oneness. But in a way, I believe in another kind of oneness now, because I think the.
So I know we're digressing a little bit, but is yours more sort of a pantheist type oneness, or is it energy is all one, or consciousness is all one, or what?
No. Like, I'm a naturalist, and I don't really believe it, but I think it's like, for example, Baruch Spinoza's view, this kind of monist view. I think it's an interesting way to look at it, although I don't really see it as like. Am I holding a door open for that some version of panpsychism could be true, although I don't really think it. I wouldn't bet my money on it.
Yeah, I guess it depends on the attributes, the nature of a, well, not in your case, but for the religions necessarily a God. If God was all there was, as I've said many times, and that's what religionists tell us, the Abrahamic religionists tell us that God was all there was, then by definition we must be in some sense a source of God, in which case that view to me is much more coherent than a view that you have a God and a separate creation, and the separate creation is in no way connected to the God, no way at all. It's like like a human being walking over there with sand and making it, but the sand and the human are in no way, and that, given the concept of the gods that they put forward, seems to me to be impossible. But
that's a good point. Like the monotheism. Is the monotheism of Abrahamic religion like even monotheism, because you have one God, but the creation is a different substance? That is also the question. I think that was one of Spinoza's argument also, that like if a God is infinite and the creation is outside of God and not part of God, then God can't really be infinite. I mean, you can make another kind of George Kantian argument against that different infinities can exist independent of each other. But I think the Spinozian view is more simple and therefore more beautiful.
Yeah, well, as I say, it depends on the sort of nature. That's why I always ask, in particular Muslims, because I'm not sure that all Christians have the same view, but certainly I ask Muslims, was God all there was? Is he infinite and eternal? And if those three criteria are met, it seems to me that makes it impossible for anything but God to exist for all time, at all places, whatever places means. And if that's the case, then at some godly moment, for want of a better word, there was God, and then there was God plus other things, be it angels or the Qur'an or whatever, and eventually then there was also a universe. And what was the source of all of this? Well, God, unless you're claiming that somehow that material came from something other than God, but you've just ruled that out because God was all there was. There was nothing else. And so
Ironically, now when I think about it, even I mentioned like Hindu pantheism. If you think about it, I even think that Hindu pantheism is more simple in a way and more coherent than the Abrahamic, that you have one creation and then you have like you have God and then you have the creation separate from God. Because although that pantheism contains a lot of gods, since they are part of the same substance, I think that is more simple and more beautiful in a way, mathematically.
I was asking about this earlier, and here it is. I was looking for it while we were chatting here, so maybe we can get you guys to just comment on this. Here's this indivisibility of God. The Quran argues that there can be no multiple sources of divine sovereignty, since, behold, each God would have taken away that each had created, and some would have lorded it over others. I mean, to me, that's an entirely human concept. Is it possible that they wouldn't do that? And the answer surely is yes, unless you can present something extra. But let's see what they say. The Quran argues that the stability and order prevailing throughout the universe shows it was created and is being administered by only one God. No, you need more of an argument. That's an assertion. Let's see what the surah says here. The Quran in verse surah 21:22 states, if there were numerous gods instead of one, in brackets the heavens and the earth, would be in a sorry state. Why? Making an assertion. Later Muslim theologians elaborated on this verse, saying that the existence of at least two gods would inevitably arise between them at one time or another, a conflict of wills. Since two contradictory wills could not possibly be realized at the same time, one of them must admit himself powerless in that particular instance. On the other hand, a powerless being cannot, by definition, be a god. Therefore, the possibility of having more than one god is ruled out.
Well, that's total bullshit. Totally
illogical.
illogical.
That doesn't follow to me. It doesn't follow for me. Again, I mean, that's obviously a short, like paragraph. Maybe there's a longer argument, but that doesn't follow at all.
Yeah, you hear this all the time, and it's such a load of nonsense. This is so typical what you said earlier. It's a human concept. This is somebody saying, "Yeah, but God, we're sitting. You know, gods are like sitting in a sandpit, like kids playing together." And then somebody's going to argue, "Yeah, but this is my mountain, and this is mine, and da. You know, this is the typical story that you get. I don't understand this. Really, I don't. It's like teams don't exist. It's like people can't work together for a common goal or something. That's bull dust.
It's like these the Islamic God is basically saying no difference to say the Hindu gods or the Greek gods or the Roman gods, that they've got human frailties. Perfect. They're as weak as every other religion that has had these multiple gods and whatnot, and they're projecting the carnal desires and whims of human beings on the very gods that they're supposed to be worshipping. It's perfect.
Yeah, it's just I mean, those are just claims that I've just read out there, and in no way do I see them being substantiated. And again, maybe somebody could bring an argument, but like you said, Stops, they are presupposing that gods act like humans do. And if they are in fact gods, and they could each have a godly aspect to them, and that's what they are godly at. Being omnipresent is one, and they can communicate in a godly fashion, and that godly fashion doesn't require them to have, what's the word here, conflict of wills. I don't see that being, the case. You can claim it's the case, or you can make as if that's the case because we see humans doing that, but by definition, gods would not do that, and they would communicate, quote unquote, potentially perfectly, and each of them would have their own thing that they're doing, and they would come together and have this conversation or do whatever they do. So I just don't see that. Maybe there's a stronger argument, or it can be fleshed out in some way. And if you're a viewer and you can present something, or if you know something, I'd be interested in that. Because at the moment, to me, that's just a statement, and I don't see it as being a particularly good one.
Yeah, but David went in the debate as well, and he decried this anthropomorphism that is being carried out in the Quran, where this God has, everything is physical. He creates humans with his own hands. So he has hands, then he breathes spirit. So there must be lungs, there must be breath, there must be lips, there must be a face. And then he says, well, everything at the end of the day will die except for the face. And then people say, well, you can't really take that as literal, that only the face will remain. No, it's not. That's not the point. The point is that the description is there of this God as being a carbon copy of just, human beings. And that's it. It's just I see this as a mesh of 50 different human beings all put into one, and then with the addition that the muscles, that the power and everything is somehow multiplied by a factor of X, so that makes it a very powerful God, because after all, we all know that to create a universe requires a lot of power. But how do we get this knowledge? We don't know this. But yet it is assumed, and this is why they think that you need a lot of power to do this, and therefore humans can't do this because we're not powerful enough. Nobody knows this. But the whole concept is that of a human being. Everything that you read in the Quran describes a human being. That's it.
Yeah, and as you say, it's anthropomorphized. I don't know if I pronounced that correctly. And perhaps they argue that that's easier for humans to understand. But again, it goes back.
Exactly. That's what it boils down to. Humans need to understand it. That's why they keep it as simple as possible. And that's where one God makes more sense, because it's easier to understand. Because the pantheon of gods that you used to have, that was really complicated. Who was the higher God and the lower God, and which of the gods was allowed to go to Earth and have sex with the girls here, and then go back into being a god, and who lost his godness and became a human. That got very complicated.
Yes, I can see why that, you'd want to do away with that and just have one all-powerful God. The question is, A, does this God exist? But B, could it be another way? And, again, perhaps there's better arguments, but I haven't seen them. Not that they aren't out there, I just haven't come across them for this. So are we agreed then that at least, how would we put it, that the concept of Tawheed, A, it's easy to understand for Muslims, and do we feel that Muslims are quite safe talking about this? Because obviously we've had David Word, we've had Bob the Builder in Speaker's Corner, and of course many other critics of Islam challenge this with, like you say, these different parts where Allah's created the pen and the book and has done this, that, and the other thing, and these things are were there for all time and so forth. So the question is, from your guys' point of view, having spoken to many Muslims, etc., do you feel that they think that this is a rock solid? There's just no argument from their point of view, or do you think that there is some weakness to this that could be better exposed than perhaps Wood did or other people have done?
Yes, they do. They're deluded.
Okay, a short answer for that.
I just think the argument that they have with Tawheed is just no different than any argument that any other, like a Jew could give the same arguments from the nation of Israel, any more than any other religion that has one God. I think anybody that was into Greek mythology could argue the case with Tawheed just as good as a Muslim for Zeus.
Would it be fair to say that I think it was Zoroastrianism actually that was the first actual monotheistic tradition? So I think that, to me, that would be the originator of that whole one God concept, at least on like a mass level. So
but Zoroastrianism was not but actually you find similarities with that in Islam also, but it was more like it was not denying the existence of other gods. It was just that you should only worship Ahura Mazda. But you find that in Islam also. They don't, like when so-called Wahhabis explain La ilaha illallah, they don't explain it. There is no God but God. They say there is no God worth worshipping but God. And that is actually the Zoroastrian.
Yeah. So then when it comes to the other pagan gods, then does the Quran explicitly say that those pagan gods don't exist, or does it just say that? Because I've always wondered about that.
Nah, I think if you take it to its end, it says that they don't really exist, but it's a bit like vague sometimes. But if you take it whole together, if you look at this that Abraham smashed the idols and say that they have no power and so on. I think the most coherent view is that they don't really exist. But on the other hand, like if you, for example, worship Jesus, then you make him into a god, although he's not really a god. So, but I think the more coherent is that they don't really believe that other gods exist.
Okay. And I think that's why they say, I think that's why the phrase, Allah, Allahu Akbar has been mistranslated. It just means Allah is greater, but then I think it really means that Allah is greater than who, though? I think it means it's greater than your God, ultimately. So yes. There you go. There you go.
Somebody's asking in the chat, is Allah asexual? Well, obviously the most Islam, Christianity, to my understanding, posit that God has just always existed. So nothing else could possibly exist, always have existed, or be eternal or infinite. Well, eternal in this case.
I actually think asexual is correct, because he's like lem yalid wa lem yulad, like he wasn't born and he doesn't give birth to anything. Anyway, there are many things that I think asexual is actually correct, but they wouldn't like to use that word.
But surely asexual still points to something that was created, even if it can't create itself. It cannot further create other things, but an asexual, as far as I understand, I mean, tell me where I'm wrong, refers to something that has been created. It's not something that has always existed, right? Because that's the concept that they talk about.
But if you're speaking about desires, I think it's quite clear. I don't think Muslims believe that Allah has sexual desires in any way. So he's asexual.
Asexual is the lack of sexual attraction to others, or low or absent interest and desire in sexual activity. It may be considered a lack of sexual orientation, or okay, sure. I mean, you could, I guess, posit that. I mean, there's nothing that's I say nothing. I mean, stops. Is there anything that we're in the Quran that talks about, Allah having an attraction for His creation in some way? That's not just creation.
No. There is a hadith about that Allah feels envy. That is kind of related to
what does He feel envy of?
There is some weird hadith about that Allah feels envy when in relation to men's and women's relations, but I have to refresh my memory a little bit. I have to look up those hadiths, but it's not really a sexual desire, it's just some kind of envy.
Yeah, but if God creates humans in His image, because there are also hadiths which refer to that, and like I said in the Bible, what happens if you're a hermaphrodite? How does that work? So you cannot be asexual if you create men and women, and both, and mixes, and in-betweens, and 50 different genders. How do you do that? It doesn't make sense either, does it? So this whole concept of a God creating things as a replacement of or for Himself, and in the way that resembles itself, that also doesn't make sense.
I think when it talks about, I don't know, I can't think of where in the Quran or Hadith where it says that Allah made mankind in His image.
Hadith.
It's in the Hadith, is it? So that's Muhammad saying in.
So it's not Quran. No.
In Hadith, okay. Because looking at it from the biblical perspective, where it says, I think it's in Genesis 1:26, let us make man in our image. I think from there, it's not really saying that God's got eyes, nose, and He can breathe or anything like that. We have to understand that when you look at the Bible, God is actually condescending in His language. He's giving you an image. He's not saying that's what I look. Because if you look at the book of Isaiah, He makes it quite clear, what do I look like that you can craft an image out of me, out of wood, metal, or whatever. So he's quite clear you can't make an image of Him. Because there's no image that you can have of Him, or you can't craft an image of something that how do you understand what it looks like?
Exactly.
So when it says in Genesis 1:26 about let us make man in our image, it's often put across as though it's with the Adam was created with the reflections of God's qualities, wisdom, love, patience, all of those. Okay, in the same way that a person might say, well, he's the image of his father, looking at a boy, or looking at a girl. Oh, she's the image of a daughter. It's.
Yeah, but then you can see the resemblance. By the way, does the Christian God keep earth time in heaven?
Sorry?
Does the Christian God keep earth time in heaven?
No, there is no time. If you believe in the spiritual dimension, then that's outside of physicality. Physicality is where time exists. Time is physical, and we know that by movement and the gravitational pulse. So before these things existed, and if God created the universe, that would have been in a dimension that doesn't have time. So God doesn't measure time in the universal way, in a physical universal way.
But he still does. There's some form of it, even if we don't use, let's call it universal time. Would there not be something like God time and God space, for want of a better word? Because obviously we have difficulty describing these things because, isn't there the concept of him being eternal? And if that's the case, then what does eternal mean other than some form of, let's call it a God time? Because why would you even say that?
Yeah, but that's because everything that you find, if you're looking at the Bible, is written from the point of view of a man. It's a bit like if you look at a two-dimensional world and a three-dimensional world, each plane of existence can only relate to that plane of existence that they exist in. If you're trying to help people in a two-dimensional world understand what a three-dimensional world is like, you're not going to be able to do it by showing them. You'd have to articulate it in a way that they can comprehend on their level of existence. In the same way, if you understand that there's an intelligent designer or a God, that would live on a multi plane of existence that is far beyond our own comprehension. That's why you have a lot of mental images put in the Bible, but also to help us understand that if you could behold it, this is what it could look like if you could behold it. I'll give an example, if I may. In the book of Ezekiel, there's the description of Satan. He's made of gold and he's got all these gems in him. Well, obviously, the angel wasn't created out of a physical product, and he wouldn't have had all these gemstones put in him for two reasons. First of all, gold is just a mere metal, and stones, whatever they are, emeralds, rubies, and diamonds, they've got no value to the creator. But what it's helping you understand is that if you could behold this spirit creature, this is how beautiful he is. So it's just a picture image. It's not a reality.
Okay. So it's very different than Islam, because it's really like that.
Well, Islam, I wanted to do this at another time, and I'm hoping that one day you'll give me the opportunity, because I've got a fantastic argument to crush Islam on this, because it describes Adam as being 90 foot tall, but this is when he's in heaven. Now, in heaven, it's supposed to be a spiritual dimension, but they're applying physical realities to a dimension that's outside of space and time. The Bible makes a mockery of this in the book of, I think it's 1 Kings or 2 Kings, where Elijah is on the Mount Carmel and he's insulting the god of Baals, and he's basically saying, maybe your God can't hear us, maybe he's sleeping, maybe he's gone to the toilet for a shit. And he's applying physical attributes, he's mocking the Baal worshippers, he's applying physical attributes to a God that's supposed to be in the spiritual dimension. That's what the Bible does.
Yeah, but you can't take that element out of it, because after all, gods were made by men. It's something that, people conceive. I mean, you can't conceive of something that you cannot conceive of. You can't imagine something that is unimaginable.
I take your point there, Stops, but I come from the perspective that when I'm talking to a Muslim or Islam, I'm going to come from the biblical perspective, because you're claiming to be from the Abrahamic religion. So I'm going to take all the logic and all the understanding and all the teachings that I've got here, and I'm going to check for consistency with the Quran. And at every level, it's destroyed. And that's the premise I have when I come as a non-Muslim against a Muslim. So the discussion we're having now is you're coming from the point of view there is no God. I'm coming from the point of view, okay, I'm going to come from the Judeo-Christian God point of view, and let's see if it tallies up.
Yeah.
And on both avenues, on both roads, you've got the canon and I've got the exeget.
Another quick question, Jan. Maybe this is the question I should have asked, or I could better have asked. Somebody quite rightly put in the chat there. The issue is not whether Tawheed or Trinity makes more sense. The issue is whether the scripture supports it in the first instance. So let me ask the question this way then, Stops, and TJ and Thunderous and Abu. Does the scripture support Tawheed clearly in the Quran without any ambiguities or contradictions, or not?
Absolutely not.
Absolutely, fundamentally not. And I would, the surahs I would use are the ones where God is always talking as a multiple. We did this. We did this. He's always spoken in the we sense. And that Elizabethan in English didn't exist then. So where is he getting the we from? And
But the we thing, yeah, I actually think that is not a strong
No,
argument,
exactly.
because with the we thing is, I never realized what this is called in English, but like pronomen majestic.
Pluralis majesticus.
Pluralis majesticus.
But nobody
Is that the English? I want to clarify this once before. Is it really plural? Something
No,
like
it's the royal we.
the royal we. Is that the correct in English?
That is the correct version in English, yeah.
But when did that come into existence? Was that around that royal we in the 7th
No,
century?
Yeah, that was around, and that was around before. There's probably even before Arabic as a language. I don't have any evidence from the top of my head, but
So are you, Abu and Stops, suggesting that when he says we, it's just a term that's being used to describe himself in a way that it's not normal today? Is that
That's just linguistics.
Excuse me.
yeah, that's a grammatical term. That's not. But there are other things. There are other things in the Quran that could.
Maybe you guys can cover a few of those. What do you think could be a stronger argument against Tawheed being clear and concise and non-contradictory in the scripture?
I thought Abu was on a roll.
Yes, I was waiting for Abu there, actually.
No, I'm so tired. Let's stop to it.
Okay. The entire Quran, if you go and you read anything in the Quran, it reeks of multiple gods. The whole thing with Tawheed being the one, it doesn't exist. How many times does the Quran say it's the best of something? That in alone shows that there are several gods at work here. Then if you read the Quran, you will see so many different versions of the same thing, the repetitions, the inconsistencies, the themes being repeated but in a different way, and then including either grammatical errors or factual errors or things like that, which definitely come from a totally different being. And if this is a God writing the Quran, then it must be that there are different gods with different styles, different rhythm, different contents, different everything. How many times do you get Moses being described in the Quran? It's endless. It's always different people, always giving a different kind of view. You have the different versions of the creation. Once it's a blood clot, once it's a sperm drop, once it's a liquid, once it's this. So you get different descriptions of the identical thing, which definitely shows that there are different authors at work here.
Well, let me just do the old devil's advocate. I know I'm not that good at it, but I'll just do it for the sake of it, Stops, and you can just shoot me down. What a Muslim could argue, and it may be a bad argument, I don't know, maybe Muslims have done it. What they could potentially argue is, hey, Allah, when he's talking about, let's just say, the creation from a blood clot or from water or whatever, he's talking about, well, presumably they believe that it actually happens that way. Let's just assume that that's what they believe, that it does happen. He's talking about these different ways in different contexts to give you a message. So when he's talking about being created from a blood clot here and from water over there or whatever the case is, all of those are part of what we are created from. And in this case, it wasn't necessary to go into the full creation story, but more just to highlight one aspect of creation that we come into existence from. But there's a bigger picture. And if you read in context, which is often the word that we often hear, you read the verses before and after, you'll see that that's not the main message. That's just part of it. And one can just read that and carry on, because there's a bigger message there. How would you respond if somebody were to say something like that?
Well, I would say that's nonsense, because what you would need to do, you would need to add everything up to come to a picture. You would then need to go and look for a context which is not given to you. Because it says, I mean, this is the claim that the first words ever being revealed of the Quran is, look at the human beings, look at how great Allah is. He created you from a clot of blood. This is supposed to be the first sentence ever being revealed to humans. Now, how would a human know anything about this, that he is not created from a clot of blood? It doesn't make sense, because then you need to look at the entire Quran and take every single sentence ever relating to the creation of human beings. And you need to take up a paragraph, put them all underneath each other, and then find some sort of common denominator, which is not there. Then you look at different ways how you can consolidate this, and you cannot find it. So in the end, you just get the feeble argument, well, you just need to take everything together, and it sort of resembles something that we are all created from. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't add up. It's just illogical.
Yeah, I guess they could respond and going, hey, it's not, but, again, depends who you speak to. This is not a science book. It's just like you say, it's just giving you a general idea of creation. But the main point is we were created. It's not going through every single scientific step by step. So just take this bit with a pinch of salt, in the sense that it's just, it just gives you a glimpse into creation. But the main point is that we were created, and actually we need to read, there's more important parts, because Allah's already told us that we created. So these things we can, they're less important. They just kind of give us a glimpse into creation, but we know we created. So let's move on and let's look at, more important things.
And I've done this. I have come up with sentences which are very easy, which are very primitive, but they are true. And this is the difference. If you take the sentences from the Quran, they are factually incorrect. But if I come up with a sentence which is very, uneducated, but at least it's not a lie and it makes sense because it resembles and reflects reality. And that is the thing. So it doesn't need to be scientifically accurate. The sign can be there, but it can be very basic, very brief, but then at least it's correct.
Yeah, I think, well, I would agree with you. And I think that's, one of my big points is the Quran is evidence against the God. So when you read the Quran, as you said, if this God is all-knowing, all-powerful, sending an error-free, concise, clear book for all times, for all people, then clearly the Quran is the best evidence against that claim. And as you say, any one of these sentences, any one of these things, we could write more clearly, concisely, that everybody could understand today in a better way. And so
another factor is you need to take the hadiths into consideration. You know that I don't like this, but in this case, I will make an exception, because if you look at the hadiths and you need to accept them as something that is worthwhile. You need to accept them as something that somehow resembles the wish of a God that is being transmitted to Muhammad and then via Muhammad to the humans. And the Quran is being written by somebody who is capable of changing sentences according to the hadiths when the wording is wrong, when the blind man is sitting behind Muhammad as he writes something down. I mean, he's supposed to not be able to write, or maybe there's a scribe, we don't know, but the hadith says something different, changes the Quran to reflect the inability of somebody who is handicapped, who was created handicapped, that he cannot provide the same sort of physical support in the battlefield. And the guy complains and says, yeah, but why is it only the able men who are able to fight who get the benefit when I cannot because I am blind? And then he changes the Quran to reflect that. The same thing when he says he is the best of the creators. This is an addition by somebody who is standing next to the scribe and says, oh, I like that sentence, I'm going to put it into the Quran. So there the Quran itself is being contradicted created by the Hadith, which are supposed to have been given by God to this Muslim guy, this Muhammad guy.
Yeah.
So there's so many things.
Are there?
Sorry, say it again, Thunderous.
I was going to bring that point up earlier on. It came to me as Stops was speaking earlier about Allah is the best of creators. That's a plural. So I was just wondering, how many other creators are there in?
And again, maybe they can just sort of say that that's a figure of speech. It doesn't really reflect, reality. That's just the way it was said at the time.
With respect, there is no way you can blag your way out of that one.
I'm doing the best I can.
You don't do that, mate. Come on, Rob. We're not a bunch of muppets here.
Doesn't it also say that Allah is the best of deceivers?
Yeah.
But exactly. Yeah. So how many deceivers are there that he's in competition with? That he's the best one, and then he's the best creator.
No, I didn't say that.
He fills the dual role.
Sorry, TJ, say again.
I'm saying that he fills a dual role, so it's both creator and deceiver. So how many creators and how many deceivers then is he competing against?
Yeah. Well, it's a shame we don't have a Muslim or Muslims on here that want to come and explain this, better. I'm doing devil's advocate, but clearly not doing a good job. And I'm sure there's Muslims on there that could, or believe they could do a much better job. But surprisingly enough,
no. You are a better devil's advocate than many apologists.
Well, again, I try to, represent it as best I can from what I've heard and what I'm working with. If you're working with sand, you're not going to build, a castle with sand. So you can build a sand castle. That's about as good as you can do. But I not want to bring in fallacies and other nonsense. So I am limited with the tools that I have. So I can do the best honest view that I can with that. But it's a shame if you are a Muslim, you're watching, you want to join in and give us your view, some clarity on this, then feel free to do so. I'm trying to be as honest as I can and taking your views.
I doubt that's possible.
But I
doubt
notice,
any
by the
Muslims
way,
will come in.
No, sadly, I mean, occasionally we'll have somebody that comes on, but they do seem to flock to people like what's his name? Who's our gang member? Raspek. Raspek channel is a magnet for a certain group of Muslims, and for whatever reason they don't want to come here. So I will see if I can get on. He was on the other night, and I couldn't go on. I had an appointment, but he did put the link in, and I wanted to go on there and invite them to come here, but I wasn't able to come on, unfortunately. But he gets a lot of Muslims on there. Obviously, he's very what's the word? He somehow seems to be very apologetic for Islam, thinking that, in some way, and then when some people like Go Live Media and others, and not just him, others as well, call him out as a kafir, he doesn't like that. So he somehow wants to, believe that you can be a Muslim or you can accept what Islam says and not be a Muslim. Trying to split the difference.
Idiot. And no, I cannot. I've tried hijab. I've tried all the, I don't know if you know IERA or LDM. I've tried all those guys. Nobody's prepared to talk to me.
Because you're so Islamophobic, bro. Stop.
Yeah, because that's exactly. And this is what I love. This Kenny, our village idiot. He goes and he writes a hate monger, but with capital H and a capital M. This is always so funny. The way he spells capitals, it's quite funny. So I'm a hate monger, and of course, what was it? The highest Islamophobe or something. What was I? I don't know. It's something. So at least I've got a title.
The Grand Islamophobe?
I don't know. There's some superlative that he's come up with.
Yeah, of course. My view is I take a dim view of that, and my respect for somebody definitely plummets when the Islamophobe, hate monger, these sort of emotional words that are utterly subjective come out. I know I'm not speaking to somebody who's there to have a strong intellectual discussion. This is just somebody who'll throw out words they've heard somewhere.
With an IQ of 150, come on.
Well, it's like somebody shouts racist. Like, it's just to shut down the debate, or just for like, character assassination where they have
Yes. Those sort of people I don't rate particularly highly in any way. If you have to bring in those words, and isn't it funny? You never hear those sort of words from people at a higher level. They just don't bring that in. But you can recognize the different levels of people when those words sort of come in, and people, so. That 150's Detective Inspector 150 just saying, you may remember I actually read out the Facebook message that he posted talking about his 150 IQ and his 98% reading comprehension. So I did read it out. It's not us making it up. If you go back and look at shows, it was actually read out. So, in fact, I might even still have it. Who knows?
Let me go to the next guy, because there was another guy that I wanted to mention today in the show, and that is Christian Prince. Now, I don't know if people remember, Christian Prince is somebody who is very good at refuting the claims made by Muslims. And I have always said that, yes, he's very good at what he does, but he's very weak as soon as you take him out of his this area of comfort. And this is exactly what happened now, because I think he's a dumbass. Okay, it's Kalam went and did some investigating because he was curious. I think I can't remember what the original drive was to do this, but he realized that some some hadiths which are considered to be sahih are not. This is he's so funny. My reading comprehension is over 98% and has been on every comprehension test I've taken throughout my life. My IQ is well above average, always scoring in the mid 150s. I think it's the mid 80s.
I say it's lower than the temperature of my fridge.
Well, I just wanted to present it in case people thought I was, we were being, dishonest.
Yeah, we didn't make this up. No, this is him saying this.
Sorry to interrupt you. Carry on, stops.
No, okay. So, and Kalam went and investigated this and found out that the hadiths regarding Aisha, at least, are not as sahih as some Muslims would like them to be. Now, the funny thing is that this is according to the texts in Islam, all right? This is not something that he made up. This is not something that he created, invented, or something, but he just did the research. So he just came and he came to the conclusion after investigating the text, Islamic text, that there is a lack of, I don't know if you know, hadiths are made up of two things. One is the isnad, one is the contents. Isnad is the chain of narration. So you have different people who are supposed to be, according to the definition of the science of hadith, they need to be trustworthy. And there's a whole lot of things. And apparently, only if all these criteria are fulfilled, you can call them sahih, and then they are classified as sahih by the scholars. Now, he did this, and he followed them back, and he found that, number one, they're not reliable. Number two, some are missing. Number three, some are known to be unreliable transmitters of these sayings, and so on and so forth. And some can't even be traced back all the way to Muhammad. He came up with this, and he wanted to talk to Christian Prince about this and say, listen, by the way, be careful when you say that Sahih Muslim and Sahih Bukhari, for example, are gospel truth. Be careful, some of them may not be, so just take it with a pinch of salt. And now Christian Prince got all upset, saying, no, you can't do that. You can't say that. And now there has been an altercation because, and this is the funny thing, all of a sudden Christians think that Kalam is apologizing for Islam because Christians would like Muhammad to be the pedophile. Christians would like Muhammad to have had a wife of 6 and had sex with a 9-year-old. And now suddenly seeing that this is not so honest and not so reliable, they are automatically taking this as an apology for Islam, that Muhammad is not as bad as they would like to make him out to be. And this is the whole altercation at the moment, where I'm standing there and I'm saying to myself, what the fuck is going on? All Kalam is doing is he's showing the text. All he's doing is he's showing the result of his research. And he is not fabricating this stuff. And Christian Prince got so angry with him. He slammed the phone down on him, and he was so angry. He was so agitated with the whole thing. I can't believe this. And he could not understand. He did not let Kalam explain anything. He constantly interrupted him. He constantly said, listen, get out of here, shut up. You don't know what you're talking about. These are the scholars. And Kalam says, hang on, I am the one who investigated this. And Christian Prince shows his weakness now, because he says, show me a scholar who says the same thing. And this is the point. You do not need to always have a scholar by your side if you are finding something. And this is the beauty in science. You don't have authorities. If you find something wrong in the theory of evolution, come out and say so. Put the facts on the table. Let's go and have a conversation about this. And this is what somebody like Christian Prince can't do. He is so entrenched that he wants Muhammad to have had a 6-year-old wife, that he is not able to let go and say, okay, bring your facts, let's take a look at this, and then let's talk about this. He refuses point blank to accept it. And this is what's happening at the moment.
Yeah, I think we were talking about this earlier, weren't we, Stops? You know, whatever is true or likely to be true is what we need to accept. You know, and if that paints Islam or Muhammad in a slightly better light in some way, then we've got to accept that. It's not a case of let's keep this because it paints them badly. I mean, there's so many other things that doesn't put Islam or Muhammad in a particularly good light. So if in fact it's the case that all or most of the scholars were wrong, and in fact Kalam is right, if in fact that's the case, you know, then we need to accept it and you know, move on, because there's many other things out there. And I think you're quite right. There are people that, you know, and I think, you know, we can all say we have a dislike for Islam, but I think what hopefully the people in this panel would do is, hey, if there was something to be shown that in fact didn't paint Islam in as bad a light, then we would have to accept that that's true. Whereas, as you quite rightly pointing out, perhaps somebody like Christian Prince or others, for example, want it to be true, and they will actually fight for it to be true, because then they've got something else that they can use, and that's more of a political sort of thing, almost, in a sense. And you know,
I don't think, sorry, I don't think it. I know it's a nice thing to perhaps have as an image that if there was something positive, you'd hold on to it and defend Muhammad if he had done something positive. But I don't think society and humans in general actually work like that. And to give an example, when you think of, say, a serial killer, let's say like Harold Shipman in England, murdered, they say, upwards of 200 people. It doesn't matter whatever good he has done in his life, he's totally ruined it by the crimes that he's committed. So you know, and it's the same thing with Fred and Rosemary West. They actually had a good reputation in the area that they were living, but it doesn't matter what good you find in what they've done in their lives. That has totally been destroyed by the vile crimes they've committed. And it's the same thing with Muhammad. You may well find something good in the Quran and in the Hadith, but when you look at how much it is outweighed by the bad and evil and monstrosities that are in those texts, there's no way of redeeming or defending anything good about Muhammad or Allah in any context, because the bad outweigh.
Yeah, but this is the point that I was trying to make. It is not about the contents. It is not about the fact, you know, whether this is immoral or not. It is about the methodology of accepting what the Hadith say as being sahih, as being authentic. It is only a caveat to keep in mind when quoting these texts out of the Hadith, that maybe a narration which is supposed to go back to Muhammad maybe does not. Maybe even the Sahih ones, maybe they do not. So don't take them as such. Just because it's in Sahih Bukhari does not automatically mean that they are all the way authenticated and can be taken as truth. Like Adnan Rashid says, they are 100% like gospel truth and almost like scripture. It is not the case. And this is the only thing that Kalam is saying. He is not talking about the contents. He's not talking about what it means for Muhammad. And most of all, he doesn't say that it is not something that happened or did not happen. He's just saying the methodology is flawed, and the science of the hadiths, the way that they are being explained, and the way that it's being applied are two different things. And that's it.
Oh, does that mean then that the hadith that Asim al-Hakim had on his channel earlier on in the week about if a fly lands in your drink, you dip the whole thing in, then you toss it out, that might not actually be a true Sahih hadith just because a scholar for $1 quoted it?
We don't know. You
Oh,
need to investigate it. This is the whole point. You need to investigate it and look at it.
Oh, does that mean I have to investigate the hadith about the fly that lands in your food?
Either you accept it or not. But if you don't accept it and you have a reason why you don't accept it, then it makes a lot of sense. But if you say, look, for me, everything that is in Sahih Bukhari is Sahih, is authentic, then you accept it. Okay, then we can argue about it. Then we can talk about these things. Then you can come up with this fly thing. But if I go and say, well, look, number one, it's ridiculous. Number two, it's wrong. And number three, look at the isnad, it's broken. Why do you believe it? Then this is just another point. But it's got nothing to do with the contents.
Right.
Yes, I guess what you're saying, Stops, is to find out from the Muslim to whom you're speaking, unless you have the potentially the evidence as Kalam has done. If you don't have that, then you ask your interlocutor, whoever you're speaking to, do you accept Sahih, Bukhari and the rest of the Sahih hadiths? And if they do, well, then you talk about it as if it's true. If they don't, then you don't. Or if you're coming with Kalam's view, which, hey, I'm questioning this particular hadith or whatever the case may be, then that's a separate argument. So you have different arguments depending on who you're speaking to. But
Correct.
Ultimately, I guess what we'd really want to have is we'd want to understand whether they are in fact true, whether the train of generation does follow all the way back or not, or whatever the case is, because then at least we can argue potentially whether the fiction is, whether it was still fictional. I think we all agree that was. But if they took the fiction from Muhammad's time and it was properly transferred down the line, and we can show that, then there's no argument that it was properly translated down or followed down the line. But if that wasn't the case, then obviously there's a big question mark there, separate from whether the actual content of whatever was transferred is in fact true.
Right. And now the next thing is the claim that the Sahih Bukhari are Sahih and are authentic and they need to be taken as such. Well, Kalam has put pay to that, because he's just shown that one is not, and that's all it takes. So now it's up in the air whether you take it or not, but it's quite right. You need to first discuss with somebody, do you take it as authentic or not? But in reality, we know now that they don't necessarily have to be authentic. So you would need to investigate each one before you accept it. But you can just agree on, okay, let's accept it, finished. Yeah, of course.
Yeah, because I think there's a lot of work involved in going to find that out. And like you say, even with Kalam doing that, he's going to have pushback from non-Muslims who've always believed this,
yes,
who may have claimed that they've done their own homework, and so.
Yeah, but I just want to clarify this, because there's a lot of stuff going around which is like emotional, and I like putting things back on track on facts, and it's a pity because Kalam was saying he might be joining us today, and he could have done it himself. But I hope I represented this accurately.
I'll also just chase him up here quickly and see if he's still around to do that. But
anyway,
yeah,
but it's worth. I mean, it's another thing that you always decide first what it is that you are talking about, concentrate on one topic, and then you go and you say, okay, this is what we're talking about, these are the premises, let's take that and do not stray from that and stay with it.
Yeah, and I think what I've noticed, I don't know about you guys, but the Muslims I've spoken to, and I don't claim these are all the Muslims, but I've spoken to a fair few, they're very hesitant to stay on one topic and to go into it in a nuanced way, whatever the topic is, especially if it's like yourself, Stops, or a Christian Prince, or a Kalam, or whoever it may be, with regards to the Quran, or for myself on the bigger arguments, just the outside of the depth of the Quran. They don't want to stay on it. And what I notice, and again, it's just the people I've spoken to, in fact, there may well be Muslims that do stay on topic and don't bring up logical fallacies and jump around. But many of the ones I speak to, I don't know whether they do this consciously or unconsciously. They just seem to be very poor representatives of Islam in just for having a logical, non-fallacious discussion. I don't know, maybe you come across ones. Yes, they could be wrong, but they're honestly representing, and they're doing their best not to bring up, fallacies in their discussions.
I find such ones to be merely Muslims by rote, or they're just halal shop DVD watchers, and they get their arguments. They get their arguments from Ahmadiyat and Faker Naik, and they just argue with what they remember. Because if you look at the arguments of Faker Naik and Ahmadiyat and the other Yasir Qadhi and Asim al-Hakim and such, and Useless Estes is another one, they don't go into depth on any particular subjects. They tend to touch on each subject. So you find that the Muslims you're talking to are very much like that. They've watched their YouTube videos of their heroes, and the videos are not particularly long, so that's pretty much the depth of what they have of any particular knowledge of any particular subject that they're going to argue about. Hence why they keep hopscotching.
And it could also be, and I think Stops touched on it, or maybe it was TJ or Abu as well, about the level of intellect that a lot of Muslims appear to have. Not that they aren't capable of something more. I'm not saying they're all stupid per se, but what they're appealing to people at a very simplistic level, because that's as far as the brains have so far developed or been allowed to develop, or the way that their society and the way it is. So you have this very simplistic view and nuance. Let's use Ali Dawah as an example. He's been around the block for a long time. You would think, having a conversation now, he would have taken more time to be nuanced. When you have the conversation, it literally, it's like the first time he's ever argued any of these points. And when you respond, you just get gobbledygook in response. He can run off the script, boom, 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 boom. But then when you go into it and you now want to have a discussion, and this is the case with others as well, now it's all over the show. They either do not even understand what you are saying, or the responses are just so off base that you go, have you never heard somebody challenge, some of the nuances of this position? It's astounding to me. And even people like Hijab and others, they only go one level deeper, if that at all, and then the fallacies come out there as well. So it's just very surprising to me, that we don't have people that can go. I haven't encountered, people that can go much deeper.
But then this goes back to what I said, or what I've said to stop several times, that if you're going to defend a lie, all you have to defend that lie is more lies.
I love somebody in the chat.
So how much depth are you expecting if you're defending a lie?
Well, I mean, if you take, and again, it depends on who you speak to. If you take some of the Christian apologetics, and especially the philosophers and the higher level apologists in Christianity, they've got a much deeper grasp. Now, I don't think that any of their things are true, but if you have a conversation with, or you listen to some of these people, they're at a much higher level than the Muslims in terms of the arguments and the nuances and the rebuttals and the responses and the backwards and forwards. Again, I don't think that they've got good arguments per se, but they can definitely go deep, and I don't see that with the Muslims. And somebody in the chat they put in the Ali Dawah socks are more complex than Ali Dawah. This is the level that you're at. Is hey, my socks? What about my socks in this phone? And
was that a typo, or was it definitely socks?
But he said that in Speaker's Corner, so somebody's not making this up. He's talked about his socks. Is this mobile phone more complex than my socks? And is the universe more complex than the mobile phone? Well, that wraps it up then. I mean, that simple argument just does it. It must be the case. You guys, I'm sure in his mind he's going, this is just so simple. How do you guys not get this? This is a knockdown argument against you atheists and you other people out there. I mean, it's just so simple. I mean, me, Ali, I've got this. And to the gullible and ignorant around him, they go, yeah, this makes sense. I mean, how can anybody argue this? It's just so good. And you stand there and you're going, holy crap. Let's just dig a little bit deeper here. But sooner you dig a little bit deeper, it's just quicksand. You just fall right through. There's nothing underneath that. And the responses are just either non-existent or so terrible. It's unbelievable. But he's learning this from other people, by the way. He didn't come up with this himself. And Stops and I have got a little pamphlet, let's put it that way, that maybe we'll reveal in time on this sort of thing and how these people are being taught. So we have some insight into how these people are learning some of their quote unquote apologetics.
The methodology,
it is so basic. You could really give it to a school child in secondary school and get them to memorize this. But when you go out there and then you're confronted with people that, have a little bit of a deeper or just critical or understand more about these or have heard these before, well, now the response from the Dawa people is and one guy, maybe we should do a show on him. Have you guys seen this fella? I'm digressing, but it's an open topic now. Have you seen this fella with the microphone that you might see? I don't know, it stops, you guys might know his name. He's quite a well-spoken Muslim, and if you go and listen to him, he goes with his cameraman and he'll just find people randomly on the street and he'll go through the Dawa apologetic. I don't know what his name is. He's got a bit of a beard.
He's the Ahmadiyya guy.
Is it? Is that the guy?
Is that the guy that I don't know. There was some guy I remember watching on YouTube once, and he approached a Christian, and he pointed out the scripture in the Bible where Jesus was in the Garden of Gethsemane, and he was on his knees, and he turned around and says, "Well, what religion prays like that on their knees?" And the guy says, Muslims. And then he went through scriptures like that to try and say that Jesus was a Muslim. Is that the guy you're thinking of?
It might be. I mean, I've heard him speak to other people, and apparently it was a teacher, it was this one, that one. But what he's if you listen to him, he uses the guy's name a lot. Now, I pay attention to the tactics and the psychology and the language that's being used. So this guy would say, like,
I know who you're talking about.
Do you know who I'm talking about? Continually using the person's name. Very, very polite, very articulate in the sense, but he gives the very basic arguments. And Thunderous, I just want to say this. And one of the things that, let me go through this argument. What do you think of that, Thunderous? And Thunderous, and now this. And so you hear it a lot. He's got this beard. He's in his late 50s, 60s, I guess he is. I don't know if it stops, you probably know who I'm talking about. I don't know what his name is.
Absolutely, totally. And I've tried asking him, and he immediately censors you. Immediately.
Oh, really? That's a shame, because he goes around and seemingly he finds these people who don't know any of these arguments, who are just seem to be taken in by this. And if you watch the videos and you see the other person, it's like they've never heard this before. That it's like it's magic to them. It's like they're being hypnotized almost. And I just find it
about him.
Have you?
I show his tactics, but I can't remember what it's called and where it was. This is a long time ago. Where I show his tactics, what he does.
Monkfish is saying Dawa is easy. I think he's saying this. He's our repository.
Correct.
Want to know anything? Then Detective Inspector Monkfish will know.
God bless your memory.
He's brilliant with these sort of things. Let me see if I can find that. But that sort of fella, and the arguments are so basic. But the people, and again, these obviously cherry-picked people. Here he is. Yes, here we go. British actor converts. Here he is. Let me send you this link. I think it just, because I know the tactics. What somewhat annoys me just a tad is how often he uses the person's name, just continually using the person's name. There we go. I've put it in the back chat as well. That's the fella. I don't know what his name is there. Dawa is easy. So yes, thank you, Det, D-E-T. I don't know what the fella's name is. Perhaps somebody can.
Dettin. Yep. Mr. Dettin.
Is that his name? I don't know.
No.
No. I'm a Detective Inspector Monkfish for short is Det, D-E-T. So there's the guy. Go and have a look at that. But the arguments are so incredibly basic. But again, cherry picking certain people, and they go, yeah, that makes sense. But that's to somebody who's never. I mean, it could have happened to me. Take me 5 years ago, when I didn't know any of these sort of stuff, I would have still been. Hang on a moment. I don't know, but there's something here. I need to look into this. But these people, either it's a put-up job, or in fact they are genuine, but they just, the critical thinking is just not there. That sounds good to my intuition. Maybe that's the case. Yeah, well, I'll just go with it. And you're going like, hang on a moment, stop and think for a moment.
Exactly.
Sorry, just coughing away there. Anything else, guys? Anything anybody wants to add? TJ and Abu have been very quiet there, while the other three of us have had a good chat here. Next week, just a reminder for next week, we will have the Apostate Prophet on with us next week. So special guest, Apostate Prophet, next Friday. So if you're listening, please tune in for that. And again, if you have anybody that you think would be a nice guest for us to have, I'll try to get hold of Robert Spencer. We can do an after show, TJ, if you like. I probably won't stay on very long, but we can do it. Just if you're in the chat and you want to join us for an after show, hit a number 1. If you don't care or not interested, hit 2. I just want to see if there's anybody that wants to join. Feel free to let us know. So yes, Apostate Prophet next week. So tune into that. But again, if there's anybody of interest that that's out there, that's challenging or is a critic of Islam, that you feel would be open to coming on the show, that you either know or I can get in contact with, please let me know, and I will reach out to anybody whom we think might be of interest. With that said, Stops, have we got or Abu's been very quiet. Have we got a hadith of the day, one of you guys?
I haven't prepared one, but
should I go or not?
Yeah, go.
Abu's tired. Sorry, I forgot. Okay, Stops. How about hijab? Getting hijab on. He won't come on. Show me. He won't come on the show. Yeah. I was in contact with Saeed, his cameraman, on Facebook. He suggested in terms of debates, and this wouldn't be a debate here anyway, but they only do face-to-face debates apparently, which I responded, that's a good way to rule out anybody else who either can't make it or for whatever reason is unable to. But hijab will never come on the show, so unfortunately not. Yeah, hijab and Christian Prince, I try to push that, and they won't have it. They just won't. He's a robot. He's every single excuse you can think of. He's rude. He mutes people, and those are true. But I said, hey, we could have it on a neutral channel where he's not in control, etc., etc. We can eliminate all of your objections to the point where it's just the two of you, and you are giving information. That's possible. Well, if he wants to do it, because he's challenged hijab. But it would be that would be a miracle. That would be an absolute miracle if hijab accepted that. But as I don't believe miracles happen, very unlikely.
Okay, I don't know whether we've had this. If you have, then tell me, then I'll do the next one.
Oh, can't
Abu
remember.
Huraira, as usual, reported that Allah's messenger invited a non-Muslim, and Allah's messenger commanded that a goat be milked for him. It was milked, and he drank its milk. Then the second one was milked, and he drank its milk. And then the next one was milked, and he drank its milk, till he drank the milk of 7 goats. On the next morning, he embraced Islam, and Allah's messenger commanded that a goat should be milked for him, and he drank its milk. And then another was milked, but he did not finish it. Whereupon Allah's messenger said, a believer drinks in 1 intestine, whereas a non-believer drinks in 7 intestines. This is according to Sahih Muslim 24:51-20.
Oh dear. Right.
Science at its finest.
There you go. But it's not a science textbook, is it?
No, but if you speak gibberish as well, then you need to be called out on gibberish, and your escape route can't be, well, hey, it's not a science textbook. If you're referring to reality in some way, if you suggest this is all a joke and he was hallucinating, then fine. But of course, that's not the claim. So, at some point, Stops that is not authentic, and it. Somebody's saying in that.
Are you talking about Yusuf Chambers? I don't know. Yusuf Chambers is the guy from my era. No, that's somebody else. That's somebody else.
Oh, okay.
That is not
all
authentic,
right.
exactly.
Nobody's had any interest, I'm afraid, TJ, for an after show in the chat, so I think we'll call it an evening. I want to thank all of you, TJ,
Thank you.
Thunderous, Abu, and my regular co-host, Stop Spamming. Thank you guys, as
if
always.
If anybody wants something discussed, or if somebody has a suggestion, please don't let anything stop you.
Yeah, let us know in the chat or just send us a mail. And if you are somebody who wants to present on a specific topic, for a short, 15, 20 minutes, then let us know as well. We'd be happy to have you.
Thunderous, nudge, nudge, wink, wink.
Yes,
Thunderous. I told you guys, all you had to do was give me a week's notice.
Okay,
and
so
I have something prepared for you for about 15, 20 minutes.
In 2 weeks.
Okay, 2 weeks time then?
2 weeks, fine. I'll do something in 2 weeks for you.
Right, there we go.
If you have any idea at all, don't even think about stop spamming.
All right, guys. Thank you so much. It's been great having you all on the panel. Again, thanks to everybody who's a viewer. If you know anybody, then send us our way. If you want to join us, then let me know. And with that, we'll say good night until next Friday, 8 p.m.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Bye.